Hello, Galaxy. I'm Chris Pirillo, and I have been playing with, and working with, and fiddling with, and tweaking with, not twerking with, the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now that I've put that thought in your head, I can say that it is definitely an iPhone. It doesn't feel, as an overarching experience, that much different from the previous generation iPhone, the iPhone 14 Pro Max. This is the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I know that even in using it this brief time, the action button has come in very handy. I have it mapped to, as I had suggested in previous videos, if you've watched the fun boxing and the preview of what this might be and how it might work, I mapped the action button specifically to the camera, and just simply by pressing and holding, it launches right into the app. That's everything I might have wanted. I would have appreciated deeper features like a double tap doing something else. But, over time, maybe Apple will adjust that. That very well could be a software tweak. And that is probably going to be the bulk of where we're going in this particular video. To me, this is, as far as an iPhone is concerned, a great iPhone, because you are used to the iPhone. It hasn't changed all that much in relation to software for a number of years. And you may actually find that as a boon. You may appreciate the comfort and the familiarity of the operating system. But unfortunately, with that comes a series of glitches, is probably the wrong word to use, but it's appropriate. I've had a problem with many elements of Apple's UI since iOS 7. So for about a decade now, and specifically in how the slop and shop, the jank, specifically in scrolling, transitions, I can't even say. Actually, the way I said that is the way that a lot of the animations sometimes play off in scrolling. Very broken, hiccupy. But I am telling you, I am consciously seeing problems. And just because you don't see a problem in the software doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist, because everyone for a number of years, every year, every cycle, it must be your phone. Oh, someone's gonna take a trip to the Genius Bar. No. It's not my phone. Tech support isn't going to fix it. It's the problem of Apple not having its eye on the ball in terms of software quality control. Forget the mystery meat navigation for a second, okay? And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. The thing to me, in relation to my experience with the iPhone, the usability, the user experience, is hindered by these constant micro slaps. And this time around, I captured in slow motion video a few examples of how elements on the screen will jump around when you're scrolling or not be fluid in a scroll. And I'm using iPhone 15 Pro Max, but this problem has existed on previous generation iPhones going all the way back to the beginnings of iOS 7. So that would have been the iPhone 7, right in that time frame. It's not something I think Apple's going to fix. I know someone there has got to see the problem, unless I'm wrong, and they don't. But I can guarantee, and I don't invoke his name in this, capacity all that often, but there's no way in hell Steve Jobs ever would have stood for this. No way. And that is one of the reasons why I fell in love with the iPhone. It wasn't because it was an iPhone, it wasn't because it was from Apple, but because Steve Jobs was an amazing product manager. He had a fine eye for detail. So when I speak about the fluidity, let's say the first iPhone, even though by today's standards it wouldn't line up, we're not talking about today's standards. We're talking about over a decade ago standards. And it was a more fluid experience than the experience that I might have with these micro interruptions on iOS, on any modern iPhone. But if you like the iPhone, I think you're going to like the new iPhone. But you know what? I'm probably going to say that year over year, but that still doesn't mean that I'm in love with it. I don't think it's a best-in-class mobile experience, and I haven't even had them all. I don't review iPhones for a living, and I don't review phones for a living, but I can just tell you what my experience has been. And one example of what I captured was the no notifications notification. And this is more prevalent if you see it at a higher frame rate, but it was just really jumpy and juddery. And some people said, well, thank God, I never have no notifications. I'm like, that's not helping. You're just excusing poor behavior. Like, you're just giving them a pass. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept that from $1,000 plus product from $1 billion plus company. No, they're out of runway in terms of excusability with this quality control or lack thereof. This has nothing, zero to do with stability. Nothing. I'm not talking about something crashing, right? I'm talking about just general glitchiness, ghosts in the machine, because it wasn't done properly back in the day. And this is what I'm speaking to in recent videos that I've done about effectively making a completely new iOS experience from top to bottom, and just reinventing from the springboard all the way through, because it's just grown in feature size, but discoverability has decreased. And understanding what you're doing, you have to jump through so many hoops just to get to where you want to go. And maybe this is my bias shining through, but this is where Android does shine. Like, I'm thinking intuitively, I need to change the settings for this app. Oh, the settings are not in the app. I actually have to jump out of the app, go into settings, that app, look for the app, click it, and then wonder if the settings are there. I mean, you want to talk about just, it worked back in the day when there were like 4 apps for iOS, but man, it doesn't get any easier. Not to mention the wild inconsistencies in user interfaces. I know that it would be possible to create a new iOS experience, a new user interface, a new iPhone product based upon the software, not necessarily the hardware, and have that running not parallel to, but when users, and let's say for a period of time, it would be for alpha users and then beta users. You could toggle. Just imagine this. I'm not saying Apple's going to do this, but they should. You could toggle between the iOS experience that you currently have and the new one that would run completely different. And if they did something like that, it would give users a chance to try the new one and build that buzz and build the experience while keeping the old one going. And then a few years down the road, maybe 3 or however long, they decide, all right, well, the old version's getting deprecated, you got to move to the new one. And everyone's going to move to the new one at this point in time. And then you train people, right? And hopefully, with any luck, it's not a retraining, because by and large, people can figure things out. And the biggest issue beyond normal UI issues that I run into, I had an issue in migrating from the old iPhone to the new one. And generally, they've made this seamless in the past. The first thing that happened when I initiated the transfer from the old iPhone to the new iPhone, in choosing to do it wirelessly locally rather than restoring from an iCloud backup, I brought them closer together as instructed. But then the transfer dialog that popped up on the old iPhone accidentally got escaped, and I couldn't get it back on. I couldn't do it. Like, no matter how I stepped back through the process on the newer iPhone, it would not actually kick the old iPhone into gear to bring me that dialogue again, which was funny and weird at the same. I did everything. Turned on Wi-Fi, turned it off, turned on Bluetooth, turned it off, did everything. I had to reboot the old iPhone in order to get the dialogue to pop up again. And so, okay, all right, I did that. Once I did that, the process was started, and it started going, but then the dialogue popped up on the old iPhone saying, oh, this doesn't have an internet connection. I'm like, oh, that's right, it's not currently on Wi-Fi. The old phone wasn't connected at the time. And so I was like, okay, well, let me get it connected to Wi-Fi. So swipe down, connected to Wi-Fi, and come back to the dialogue, and I couldn't do anything. Like, I couldn't go back, I couldn't retry. It was just there on the dialogue. This is indicative of the problem that is throughout iOS. So again, I ran into a problem with transferring the data locally. Instead, what I had to do was go to my new iPhone and enter the Wi-Fi data manually. That would have been something that would have carried along had the transfer gone smoothly from the very beginning, like the prime scenario. Okay, I got the new iPhone connected by way of Wi-Fi. The next step of the process was the blue tingly ball. It's like a glowing ball. It's got blue tingles that like do this, and it's kind of neat. It's nicer than a QR code, but it effectively allows one device to complete the connection to the other. You could take my word for it. You could ask the people who are watching all of this happen on live.pirillo.com, the Twitch stream. It wouldn't connect. Like, I'd done everything I needed to do, but for whatever reason, no matter how I held the device, angled and everything, I'm like, what the hell? It's not picking it up, and this doesn't make any sense. It's right there, and I know I can see it in focus. Like, what is going on? It didn't work. I had to enter my Wi-Fi password manually. I had to enter the 6-digit code manually. That's not the point. Do not excuse this behavior. And I'm not talking about my behavior, which may be a bit dramatic, but over and over and over again, I'm forced to jump through hoops that I shouldn't be forced to jump through. Not for this product, not from this company. I'm sorry. It's inexcusable. I think it's, there's a glitch in my matrix, apparently. Did you take the wrong pill? But I thought, man, I couldn't be the only one. And I discovered that a colleague, friend, Zach Rutledge, he's a Lego streamer on Twitch. Great guy, amazing person, wonderful producer. And he apparently had problems that rivaled mine in terms of his iPhone transfer and setup, going from one to the other. So what I'd like to do is interview him at some point in the near future. Hopefully you're interested in that, to hear what he had to go through to get things going. And it was definitely, if you thought this was harrowing, it wasn't harrowing. It was a minor inconvenience for me. He ran into brick walls. I'm hoping to talk to him about that, if only to show, hey, look, it's not just me. And for anybody to say, Chris, you're the only person who has a problem with the iPhone. No, you're not looking hard enough. And I don't just mean you personally. It's just there are many people who have problems with the iPhone. I just so happen to be someone who's on YouTube who has no problem speaking my truth. I'm not looking for access to events or PR. Like, I'm just telling you what I see. The one thing that I've not been able to get to kick in, locked or unlocked, is the standby mode. For some reason, even plugged in, it just won't kick in. And you're supposed to have it in landscape orientation, and it should go. Everything's on. It should be working. And for whatever reason, I don't understand why it's not working. Right? Wrong? Right. I was doing everything right, but it was wrong. No, wait, I must be holding it wrong. Was I holding it wrong? Maybe I have to stand by. Maybe that's the problem. Like, how long are we really going to wait for the standby to kick in? Oh, I was also checking to see. You didn't like this video? Really? Man, we worked so hard on it. It kicked in! Apparently you have to wait a while.
By the way, sorry for blasting your eardrums.
Okay, problem solved. I just needed more time, instead of thinking that it was just going to happen immediately. That is my fault. I'll take the blame. The camera, however, I feel has improved slightly. I don't like looking at the iPhone photos on the actual iPhone, though, because for some reason, they look way more contrasty than they do on other screens that I happen to use. I took photo comparisons between the iPhone 15 Pro Max and my Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, my go-to, and there were definite differences. The iPhone had, I feel, far better, more accurate colors, but I'm not sure it handled, I guess, the brightness and contrast as well as the Samsung device did. But the biggest difference to me was the sharpness, the pronounced sharpness on Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra photos compared to the iPhone. In the same scenario, same lighting and everything. And for me, I do prefer a little bit more sharpness. And I'm not the only person to point this out. Tony Northrup did a video saying that the iPhone 15 cameras were disappointing. And he loves the iPhone and iOS. I mean, he's a photographer, far from biased, uses a variety of products, including having previously used Android devices. But he calls Apple's strategy with these phones misleading and breaks it down and explained in no certain terms that it's pointless to use the twice the size format to save photos in because it doesn't really add anything, and explained how the telephoto had kind of been nerfed in terms of quality on the iPhone 15 Pro Max compared to the iPhone 15 or previous generation iPhones. It was kind of an eye-opener to me. I haven't necessarily been thrilled with iPhone photography for a number of years. He definitely explained it better than I could, and I would point you his direction. Again, come to appreciate the way Samsung has done it, toppling even my previous pick, which was the Pixel. From the Pixel 2 probably to the Pixel 4, those were the best photos that I could possibly take for years. And then Pixel photography kind of went weird on me too. So, I don't know, the more things change, the more they really change. I would not worry about battery life anymore with any device, but that's my use case. I'm sure your mileage will vary depending on if you play games, and I really haven't. Unfortunately, it doesn't have, solitaire built in. Like, what's up with that? How can you call this an operating system doesn't come with solitaire? I'm joking. But I'd be happy enough with what Apple had given me in terms of hardware, including the titanium. And this is probably something that needs to be underscored. Despite all the shortcomings that people have complained about in relation to, the fingerprints and the discoloration, it's light. Very light, surprisingly light. The iPhone 15 Pro Max feels like the lightest, larger phone that I've held ever, if not in the longest time. Good on you, Apple, for going titanium. The one thing I would warn you about, the case that Apple is selling is apparently total garbage, so it goes well with their software. I'm talking specifically about the fine woven case that is not fine at all. Woven, I'm not going to debate that, but it's not good at any price. This is not for me, it's from almost literally everybody else. Just a word of warning. I'm glad I went with a more generic case. Are you happy with your new iPhone? If you got a new iPhone, are you getting a new iPhone? Well, either way, at this point, I'm going to leave you to your own devices.